You look in the mirror one morning, and something feels unfamiliar. The shape of your face, the light in your eyes, even the weight of your own presence. It's not just aging. It's not exhaustion. It's deeper than that. Something inside you has shifted, and though the world outside looks the same, you are not. Spiritual awakening is not always light and bliss. Sometimes it begins with confusion, fatigue, a body that aches without reason, a sadness that has no story. Sometimes awakening means breaking open, not into something perfect, but into something true. What if the changes in your body were not random, but sacred? What if the pain, the pressure, the stillness were all signs that something higher was asking you to pay attention? In this video, we won't sell you peace. We will walk through the real path, the raw path, the body-led path of awakening, where the soul doesn't just whisper, it transforms every cell. And when it does, the body, the eyes, the mind begin to remember who you really are. Let's begin. It started with a quiet ache, not a pain, not exactly sadness, but a soft tug from somewhere I could not name. At the time, I had a good job, a routine, a version of myself that others recognized and approved of. But inside, something didn't feel right anymore. It was like walking around in clothes that no longer fit, even though everyone kept saying they looked fine. I remember one night, sitting in my car after work, engine off, street lights glowing through the windshield, and thinking, is this really it? Is this who I am? Or is there more? That question, soft as it was, opened a door I didn't know I had. That was the beginning, the invitation. No one told me that spiritual awakening often starts with restlessness or a sense of losing interest in everything you once chased. I thought something was wrong with me. Why am I pulling away? Why am I tired all the time? Why do I feel like I'm slowly dissolving? Looking back, I understand now. That was the first layer peeling back, not a breakdown, but a breaking open. And soon after, the signs began. Not dramatic, not supernatural, just strange enough to notice. Dreams that felt more vivid, like they were trying to tell me something. Moments of silence, where I felt overwhelmed by emotion without a clear reason. I remember waking up one morning and looking at my face in the mirror, and it felt unfamiliar, not wrong, just different, like something inside me had moved, shifted, grown, and my reflection hadn't caught up yet. I thought I was imagining things until I started reading stories from others, people describing similar experiences, their own inner callings, their own silent unravelings. And that's when I realized this is not chaos. This is awakening, the real kind, not the picture-perfect version, not the one with constant peace and scented candles, but the raw, messy, and deeply honest kind. Awakening, at least for me, was not about reaching a higher place. It was about shedding layers, the ones that were never truly mine. But I had worn for years the need to be liked, the fear of disappointing others, the story that I had to have it all together. One by one, those old skins came loose, not all at once, but enough to make me question everything, and enough to make others uncomfortable too. I wish I could tell you it felt empowering, but in truth, it was disorienting, like standing in the middle of your own life and realizing you don't recognize the furniture anymore. But here's the strange grace in all of it. When the old self falls away, what's left is something quieter and more real, not a perfected version, but an honest one. And in that honesty, you begin to hear the voice you forgot you had. That voice doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It waits. And when you're finally still enough, it begins to speak. That's when things truly begin to change. You stop chasing and start listening. You stop pretending and start remembering, and you realize this was never about becoming someone new. It was about coming home to someone you've always been. That, to me, is the heart of awakening, not perfection, but presence, not escape, but embodiment. A lesson I keep learning again and again with every wave that comes. So, if you've ever felt like your life is quietly falling apart, or if you've ever stared into the mirror and wondered, who is this person I'm becoming? Maybe, just maybe, you're not breaking down, you're breaking through. And your body, your emotions, your disorientation, they're not signs of failure. They're signs that something sacred is unfolding within you. We'll talk about that next. When your body starts speaking a language your soul already knows. Let's step into it together. Before my thoughts changed, before my beliefs crumbled, before I had words for what was happening, it was my body that spoke first. At the time, I didn't know how to listen. I just knew something felt off. Sleep became unpredictable. I'd wake up wired at 3 a.m., then feel exhausted by noon. There were days I couldn't eat, and others when I craved comfort foods I hadn't touched in years. I thought it was stress, or maybe I was just getting older. But deep down, something didn't line up. Then came the tension. In places I'd never noticed before. My jaw, my chest, my shoulders, always tight, like I was bracing for something I couldn't see. And the strangest thing of all was the way I started seeing myself in the mirror. Not just my appearance, but the energy around it. I'd look into my own eyes and feel like I was watching someone else. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something inside me was shifting, and my body was catching the signal before my mind could make sense of it. That's what I've come to understand about spiritual awakening. It doesn't start in the clouds. It starts in the tissues, in the cells, in the breath you didn't even know you were holding. The body, in its quiet wisdom, registers truth long before the mind is ready to receive it. Because the body stores memory, not just of events, but of emotions we never had time to feel, words we never got to speak, and truths we were too afraid to live. As the soul begins to stir and call you forward, the body begins to release, and it doesn't always feel gentle. You might notice weight changes, not because of diet, but because the body is shedding more than food. It's letting go of emotional weight, old grief, fear, stagnation that you've carried for years. You might find your posture shifting as you slowly stop carrying the heaviness of a life you no longer resonate with. For me, it was my face. It changed, not in some dramatic way, but in subtle shifts. Like the lines softened and the light behind my eyes began to return. Friends would ask, "Are you doing something different? You look brighter." I'd smile, not quite knowing how to explain that what changed was not my skincare routine, but my entire relationship with myself. These changes, though confusing at first, became signs that my inner world was becoming more honest, and the body was simply following suit. Here's the thing, no one tells you. Your body doesn't lie. It doesn't wait for your permission. It responds to truth, even when you're still clinging to the lie. So when the shifts begin, don't panic. Listen, feel, ask, what part of me is finally being heard? What emotion is asking to be released? What truth have I buried in my bones? Because every ache, every sleepless night, every sudden tear might not be a problem to fix, but a message to receive. The lesson here is to stop seeing your body as separate from your soul. It is not just a vessel, it is a partner, a mirror, a messenger. And once you stop resisting its signals, once you stop trying to fix what is simply trying to be felt, something begins to soften. You begin to trust again, not in the outer world, but in the wisdom that lives in your own skin. That is where transformation begins, not in changing who you are, but in letting the body speak. And finally, listening. And when you do, you start to see something remarkable, a glow in the eyes, a lightness in the step, a sense of coming home to yourself, not just spiritually, but physically too. Which brings us to the next chapter of this journey, the eyes, the mirror of the soul, the first place where others begin to see what has long been changing inside of you. Let's look into that. Together, it happened slowly. I didn't even notice at first, just little things. The way I looked at people, the way I looked at myself, something felt different, softer, more open, but also more piercing. Like I was no longer just seeing, I was perceiving. I remember one day catching my reflection in a shop window. I stopped, not because of how I looked, but because of the way my eyes stared back at me. There was a clarity there, a steadiness I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't pride, it wasn't sorrow, it was presence, like something behind my eyes was finally awake, finally watching. That was the moment I realized the eyes are the first to show what the soul is doing. People started to notice too. You look different. They'd say, not your clothes, not your hair, just something in your face, especially your eyes. One friend even asked, "Are you in love?" And I smiled, because in a way, I was falling in love with being here, with being fully present in this skin, with no longer hiding who I was. What I've learned since then is that when you begin releasing the emotional weight, when your body stops carrying all that silent grief, fear, and pretending, it shows. And it shows first in your gaze. The eyes become lighter, not because they've forgotten pain, but because they've finally stopped carrying it alone. They become deeper, not because you've read more, but because you've remembered more. They glow, not with perfection, but with permission to be real, to be seen, to be you. That's why, when someone is going through a true spiritual awakening, you can see it in their face. But more than that, you can feel it in their presence. Their eyes stop avoiding truth. They stop darting, hiding, seeking approval. They simply rest, calm, clear, rooted in something honest. It's hard to fake that, because the eyes don't lie. They show whether the soul has made peace with itself or is still pretending to be someone else. One of the most surprising things was how much lighter my eyes felt. It's hard to explain, but when you're no longer holding on to years of suppressed truth, it's like 1,000 tiny muscles around your eyes finally unclench. That alone can change your face, and it changes the way you look at the world. You begin to notice more, not just details, but energy, people's emotions, their walls, their stories, even when nothing is being said, because your own lens has been cleared. And when your inner window is clear, you can see through others too, not to judge, but to understand, to feel, to connect. That's what the eyes begin to carry, a bridge between you and the world, between your soul and theirs. So the next time you feel the shift, the next time someone tells you your eyes look different, pay attention. It may not be a compliment. It may be a sign that you've stopped hiding, that your soul has started speaking through you. And the most beautiful part, you don't need to explain it. You just need to live it, because people can feel the truth, even if they don't have the words for it. And that is when the healing begins, not just for you, but for everyone you meet. Because when your gaze is clear, when your presence is open, you become a mirror, a reminder of something they too have forgotten. And that kind of light is contagious. Now, as the gaze becomes clear, so does the rest of you. The next step in this journey is not about the outside world noticing you. It's about what happens inside when the person you used to be begins to fall away. Let's talk about that. The loss, the discomfort, the strange gift of ego death. There came a point when I could no longer answer the question, who am I? Not because I had found something new, but because everything old was falling away. The goals I used to chase didn't move me anymore. The stories I told about myself didn't feel real. Even my voice sounded strange to my own ears. I thought I was breaking. I really did. There were days I sat in silence, staring at a version of myself I could no longer relate to, the achiever, the helper, the one who always smiled. That person was fading, and I didn't know who was left underneath. They don't tell you that awakening includes a kind of grief, not just for what you lost, but for who you used to be, or who you thought you were. And it's not quick, it's not clean, it's not poetic in the moment. It's terrifying, because the ego, the identity we build over years, gets dismantled slowly, deliberately, sometimes painfully. It happens in conversations where you no longer know what to say, in moments of decision where the old rules don't apply, and most of all, it happens in quiet when you sit with yourself and there's no one left to perform for. At first, you try to hold on, to patch the cracks, to glue together the mask, but it doesn't fit anymore. And the more you force it, the more you suffer. That's the invitation of ego death, to stop clinging and start surrendering. And surrender isn't about giving up, it's about giving in to something deeper, something more real. I remember walking alone one evening, no destination, just moving, trying to feel anything solid. And this wave of stillness came over me. Not peace, not comfort, just truth. And the truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. And maybe that was okay. Maybe that was the point. When the ego crumbles, when all the roles, titles, and identities you built begin to dissolve, there is a space, a gap, a quiet you can't explain. And in that space, if you're patient, if you're honest, something begins to emerge. Not a better version of you, not a spiritual character to wear proudly, but a more honest self, a truer self, one that doesn't need to prove anything. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop chasing people who never saw you. You stop trying to be understood and start being at peace with being real. It's not easy, but it's real, and real is where freedom begins. The lesson, if there is one, is this: you are not here to become someone. You are here to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And that remembering often begins with forgetting, with emptying, with letting go of the self you built in order to survive now. You are learning to live, not just survive, to speak, not just please, to rest, not just perform. And that shift is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. So, if you feel like you don't recognize yourself, if you feel lost, detached, or unanchored, trust this space. It's not the end, it's the becoming. Now that the old self is crumbling, something new, quiet, and luminous is beginning to rise, and with it comes a new kind of sensitivity, not weakness, not oversensitivity, but a deep, energetic awareness that you feel everything and must learn how to live with that gift. Let's explore that next. The gift and the challenge of feeling it all. After the identity fell apart and I was left standing in the quiet, something else began to happen. I started feeling everything, not just my emotions, but the emotions of the people around me, the tension in a room, the heaviness in someone's silence, even the sadness in someone's smile. It was like all the filters had been removed, and the world came rushing in. At first, I thought I was just becoming too emotional. Maybe I was tired or too open, but it wasn't that. It was sensitivity, a new kind, a deeper kind, not weakness, but awareness, amplified. I could walk into a grocery store and feel the anxiety of strangers, stand next to someone in line, and pick up a story they hadn't told. And I didn't know how to turn it off. It was overwhelming. The noise, the crowds, the small talk, all of it felt loud. I used to be good at social situations. Now, even a simple coffee meetup left me drained for hours. Not because I was pretending, but because I was absorbing. I didn't know what to call it back then, but now I know. I was sensing energy, not just emotion, but vibration, truth, imbalance, intention. And unless you've experienced that kind of sensitivity, it's hard to explain how exhausting it can be to feel so much, so often, so deeply. But here's what I eventually realized. This wasn't a punishment. It was a gift, one I had never been taught how to use. The world doesn't teach us how to feel deeply. It teaches us how to suppress, to ignore, to numb. So when your capacity to feel increases, you have to relearn how to live. You have to create space, to rest, to reset, to ground yourself. For me, that meant saying no more often, not out of rejection, but out of protection. It meant leaving events early, without guilt, taking walks alone, without apology, sitting quietly in nature, until the static inside me calmed. I learned to listen to my body, to know when I was carrying someone else's pain, to know when it was time to release it. I learned that not every emotion I felt was mine, and that distinction changed everything. It gave me back my breath, my balance, my power. This kind of sensitivity, when you know how to work with it, is a superpower. It allows you to read beneath the surface, to connect more deeply, to sense when something is off, even before it becomes visible. But it requires boundaries, not walls, but clear energetic lines that say, this is mine, that is yours. Without boundaries, you'll drown in the noise, but with them, you'll learn to navigate the world with clarity and strength. So, if you're feeling everything, if crowds exhaust you, if people's words hurt more than they should, if you cry for reasons you can't explain, know this: you are not broken, you are awakening, and your nervous system is learning how to hold what your soul already sees. That's the gift. And the challenge of sensitivity, the lesson is not to toughen up, but to ground down, to honor your needs, to protect your energy, not out of fear, but out of respect. Now, as your energy continues to shift, you may start to notice something else, something that might surprise you. The pace of your life begins to accelerate, not because you're rushing, but because your energy is finally aligned. And when that happens, what used to take years begins to unfold in weeks. Let's talk about that next. The power and the responsibility of energy acceleration. There was a time when I would ask for something, set an intention, and then wait weeks, sometimes months, for anything to move. Now, things shift quickly. Thoughts become actions, intentions take shape, and life responds. At first, I thought it was coincidence. I would think about a person, and they'd call. I would wonder about a change, and it would arrive unexpected, but perfectly timed. I started to realize this wasn't just synchronicity. It was energy, moving differently through me. It was faster, clearer, more direct. Like I had gone from dragging a freight train uphill to suddenly sitting inside a bullet train, watching everything speed up around me. And while that might sound exciting, at first, it was a lot to handle. Because here's what no one tells you. Energy acceleration doesn't just bring light. It brings everything. When your energy field clears, when your vibration rises, you become more magnetic. You pull in what you ask for, but also everything you haven't dealt with yet. Old patterns, emotional triggers, unfinished business, all of it comes to the surface fast. For me, it looked like sudden mood swings, deep emotional purges, dreams so vivid, they felt more real than waking life. It was beautiful and overwhelming. It was like the universe had turned the volume up, and I was being asked to listen closely to everything. If you're in this stage, you might feel like your life is speeding up, like change is constant, like there's barely time to catch your breath. But this isn't chaos, it's clarity. It's your soul picking up momentum. Think of it like this. When your energy was heavy, slow, cluttered, life moved the same way. Heavy, slow, cluttered. But now, you've cleared space. Your inner train is no longer burdened with old cargo, so it flies. And with it comes everything you're ready to receive, and everything you still need to release. The lesson here is to trust the pace, even when it's fast, even when it's intense, because acceleration is not a punishment, it's alignment. When you begin to live in integrity, when your choices match your values, when your energy matches your truth, life starts to meet you where you are. It becomes more responsive, more direct, more alive, but it also becomes more honest. There's nowhere to hide, which means there's nowhere left to lie to yourself. So the real question is, can you handle what you've been asking for? Can you hold what you've been calling in? Because now it's coming quickly, and what you don't integrate will show up again and again until you do. This is the moment where manifestation and maturity have to walk hand in hand. It's not just about creating what you want. It's about becoming the version of you that can hold it with grace. So if life feels fast right now, if change is knocking, if everything you once tolerated now feels impossible to bear, it's because your soul has outgrown the slow path, and now you are moving in real time. And the more you surrender, the more you align, the more you resist, the harder it feels. Choose ease, choose flow, choose truth, and your path clears itself. Which leads us to the next piece of this journey. Because with this acceleration comes something rare and powerful, a kind of clarity you've never known before. Not the kind you chase, the kind that arrives quietly, but forever changes how you see. Let's talk about that. The rise of spiritual clarity. It doesn't come with fanfare. There's no bright light, no voice from the clouds. But one day, you wake up and you just see differently. The same people, the same places, the same routine, but it feels like a veil has been lifted. You notice what was always there, but never seen. You hear what people aren't saying, feel what a space is really holding, read energy between every word. It's subtle, but it's life-changing. That's what clarity feels like. Not dramatic, but undeniable. Like your perception has been washed clean, and now everything sharpens. Edges, shadows, truths you once avoided. I remember sitting at a dinner once. Same table, same people, same jokes, but I could feel so much more. The tension under someone's smile, the weariness behind someone's pride, the ache in a conversation that should have been light. It wasn't judgment. It was just clarity, the ability to feel without attaching, to see without needing to fix, and most of all, to know when something is true and when it is not. That knowing, that quiet certainty, becomes the compass you never had, but always needed. You stop second-guessing yourself because your inner lens is clean. Your intuition finally has space to speak, and you have learned to listen. This is the gift of clearing out the old, the traumas, the lies, the ego patterns, because without all that noise, truth has room to rise. You don't need to chase signs anymore. You become the sign. You walk into a room and feel if you belong. You sit with a decision and know what's aligned. You speak, and your voice carries something deeper, not louder, just truer. But clarity isn't just about seeing what's wrong. It's about seeing the whole picture. You start noticing beauty in places you used to overlook. A kind word from a stranger, a still moment in traffic, a pattern in nature that suddenly speaks to something inside you. Your whole world becomes a mirror, reflecting where you are and what you're learning. And from that place, you move with more care. You no longer react, you respond, because clarity gives you space between feeling and action. It's not perfect. There are still moments of doubt, still noise, still ego, but they don't drive anymore. They pass through like weather, and you stay grounded like a mountain that no longer needs the sky's approval. The lesson here is that spiritual clarity is not a prize, it's a responsibility. Because once you see clearly, you can't pretend not to. You can't unknow. You can't unfeel. And so you begin to live with greater truth, greater softness, Greater power, but not the kind of power that controls, the kind that simply is quiet, present, unshakable. And from that place, life becomes less about chasing and more about choosing peace, choosing honesty, choosing alignment, even when it costs you comfort, especially when it does, because now you can feel the cost of self-abandonment and it's too high. So you let go, you stay true, you walk forward, eyes open, heart clear, and the world begins to respond in kind, which leads us to the final step on this path. Not clarity, not stillness, but integration, when everything you've learned starts to live in your everyday life. Let's walk there together. Awakening is one thing, living awake is another, because eventually you have to come back, not back to the old life, but back to the ordinary, back to laundry, deadlines, difficult people, and traffic lights. And the question becomes, how do I stay connected in a world that keeps pulling me away? How do I protect my peace without building walls? How do I stay open without being overwhelmed? This is where the real work begins, not in meditation, not in silence, but in the everyday, in how you speak to your child when you're tired, in how you handle disappointment without shutting down, in how you walk into a room and bring presence, not performance. I had to learn this slowly. I thought awakening would make everything easier, but it actually asked more of me, not in effort, but in integrity. I couldn't pretend anymore, not in my work, not in my relationships, not even in my thoughts. I had to mean what I said, feel what I felt, and act from what I knew to be true, even when it was inconvenient. Some people didn't understand. Some things fell away, but what stayed, what remained, was real. And that's the thing about integration. It's not about being high all the time. It's about being real, grounded, honest, consistent. Yes, it's about bringing the light into your actual life, not escaping, but embodying. Can you keep your heart open in conflict? Can you stay in your body when fear rises? Can you choose love without losing yourself? That's the test. And every day, life will ask you, are you living what you say you've learned? There's no final moment, no perfect state, just practice, presence, choice, again and again, but slowly, beautifully, it becomes your new normal. You start showing up as the version of you used to only glimpse in moments of silence. You don't just remember who you are, you live it in how you move, how you love, how you walk through a noisy world without forgetting your stillness inside. The noise will always be there, but now you know how to listen deeper beneath the chaos to that steady voice that has always been guiding you home. That is integration, when truth is not something you visit, but something you carry, even on the hardest days. And if you're walking this path now, if you're in the middle of the unraveling, the rebuilding, the remembering, you are not alone. This isn't the end. This is the beginning of a life lived awake. And that is the quiet revolution the world needs most. If something in this story touched you, if a sentence lingered, or a silence felt familiar, then maybe you're already walking this path too. And if you are, you don't have to walk it alone. Here, we remember together, we grow together, we rise, not in noise, but in truth. So if you feel called, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, tell me what you're moving through, what you've let go of, what you're learning to hold, because your story might be the medicine someone else needs to hear. And if you know someone who's quietly unraveling, quietly awakening, send this their way. Sometimes all we need is a voice that says, I see you. Thank you for being here, for choosing presence, for choosing your truth. I'll see you in the next step of the journey. Until then, stay open, stay grounded, and stay gently awake